Hi everyone, I'm back with another weekly forecast video. How's everybody doing? I'm doing okay. It's a very gray and insular and rainy day here, but I wouldn't expect anything less from an October day on the west coast of Canada. It's actually kind of cozy, and it's funny because I'm recording this video now on a Sunday, but we've just entered the hour of the moon. So the hour of the moon, its feeling tone and that quality of time is a little bit dreamy and a bit imaginative. So I prepared all my notes during Mercury hour and thought I'd have it done to deliver all the technicalities. By the time I got it done, now we're in moon hour. Now I'm drinking cocoa and I'm feeling very cozy. So I don't know, maybe I'll invite you into that cozy vibe while we go through the upcoming week. So I'm playing around with a different format with this video. We'll see how it feels. It's a little bit in flux, it's a little bit in development because this is all new. So yeah, I want to try and include more charts this week, and maybe not going into full detail about every single aspect that the moon is going to make. I know that's interesting, but maybe it'll give me a little bit more kind of energy to kind of focus on some of the bigger meteor transits that are going on, so to speak. Because full disclosure, I guess the transits have been a little bit intense for me lately. As I may have mentioned before, I've got like cardinal placements in my chart, and there's a lot of that action going on right now. So anybody, you know, late Cap, late Cancer, late Libra, or late Aries rising, you may know what I mean, or anybody that has sun or moon in those positions, you may be feeling it a little bit more, this intense cosmic weather. So hope you all are doing well and weathering it okay. Yeah, let's just dive in to the week and see what we've got in store. It's an interesting one. There's, again, there's lots coming up for us to talk about and look at. And so I've got the charts ready and the notes, and we'll just go through it, as I said. So beginning the week, on Monday, of course, Monday, October the 12th, just after midnight on the 12th here, at least in the Pacific time zone. It might depend on what time zone you're in for the exact timing. You just want to add or subtract the hours. But at 12:06 a.m., we have Jupiter's sextile Neptune, and I've kind of drawn that in the chart there, sort of off to the right in the lower side. So as I mentioned before, in the aspects, the sextile is a collaborative combining of planetary energies, planets that are in signs that are in a complementary element. They're not the same, but they mix together really well. So we have Jupiter all year in Capricorn, now moving direct in earthy Capricorn, forming a sextile with Neptune in Pisces, which is very dreamy and very transcendent. And we had a few of those this year because of Jupiter's retrograde, which lasted quite a long time. We had a sextile on the 20th of February, the 27th of July, and now we're having that final sextile today, just after midnight. So classically, Jupiter is the planet of expansion and dissolving boundaries, creating opportunities, this sort of thing. As we're well aware, while Jupiter is in Capricorn, those gifts or those bounties that Jupiter can deliver are a little bit more restrained. They feel a little more conservational, in the sense that we've got to make do with what we've got. We've got to be resourceful this year. But it's still a resonance of expansion and improvement. It just is a little bit more like moderate and low key and slower in Capricorn. So it's a planet in general of expansion. Then we get Neptune, which is a planet that is also, I think, expansive in its qualities, but in a more broad and transpersonal kind of way, like very transcendent. The energy tends to be very like nebulous and dreamy, and talking about planetary or lunar connections with Neptune in these past weeks. We notice that these can be really transcendent and dreamy and imaginal times, but they can also be a bit confusing. So it's an interesting blend of those energies. Jupiter bringing expansion and Neptune bringing this transcendence. I think it has something to do with the feeling that we have this year of noticing any growth or improvement. We really have to manage our expectations and be resourceful. And yet Neptune is bringing this interesting signature of wanting to escape into dreams or into ideals or into these higher transcendent visions, maybe ideas of some kind of universal collective or connectivity that's sort of above and beyond it all, kind of hold the mystery that's sort of holding everything together. So it's the last sextile between those planets, so it's a bit of a turning point. I think those themes are reactivated now, now that Jupiter is moving direct. I think that maybe we'll see how to grow and manage our expectations moving forward while keeping some of these ideals and transcendent visions in mind, but maybe now knowing how to bring those improvements and bring those broader ideas maybe down into our lives in a more practical way, because we've learned a lot along the way. So that series of sextiles, I think, have potentially brought that to our attention and have been an interesting teaching tool. So then, you know, things continue, and then the moon is, you know, in Leo, fiery Leo, making a sextile with the sun and a trine with Mars. So there's a sort of energetic lunar transits that kind of motivate and activate the day somewhat in the background or on an intimate level. And then in the morning after sunset, we have Mercury sextile Venus, which is quite a good, you know, collaborative aspect once again, because Mercury is in Scorpio, a water sign. Venus is currently in Virgo. And it's an interesting dynamic, and I think not entirely dissimilar to that Jupiter in an earth sign and Neptune in a water sign sextile. There's a little bit of that signature here too, because water really taps us into our intuition and our feelings in the imaginal realm, and earth is where planetary energies are playing out in a tactile manner. So the same way that Jupiter's trying to bring improvements through Capricorn in a slow and moderated way, Venus is the same. She's trying to bring cohesion and connection through the earthy resources of Virgo, in again a bit more of a low-key and realistic sort of way, not these very like, you know, super luxurious ways, but more kind of practical and tangible, if that makes sense. So making that connection with Mercury, the planet of communications, is interesting because it can open up an opportunity for facilitating really good, grounded, intuitive, and sincere, and maybe conversations that have a lot of depth in our relations, our relationships, be those romantic or any kind of relational connection that we're navigating now. So that's a positive for that. It should be noted though that Mercury is moving really slow. Mercury is about to go dun, 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 retrograde. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I feel like it's kind of putting a pin in it. It's saying something is opening up now that we can discuss, and some communication that's very loving and intimate and sincere and maybe healing on some level, and clear and grounded. It's starting to open up, but Mercury is about to do its old switcheroo, so things to get interesting. So if you notice anything coming up around this time, these could be some of the themes that you'll be working through as Mercury starts backtracking over the next several weeks. And then, of course, at the end of the day, the moon enters Virgo, and then it's a different flavor for the next day. So then on Tuesday, the 13th, we have a big, transit, because we have the sun in the later degrees now of Libra. Libra season is beginning to close. Still a few more days though, forming an opposition with Mars, who's still retrograde. So much Mars. So anytime planets are in an oppositional aspect, they are in elemental positions that are related, because the sun is air, in an air sign, and then Mars is in a fire sign, of course. So typically those elements blend really well according to astrological theory, but they're in this polar opposition. So it's like they're holding down this kind of, showdown, or like a bit of a tension, or potentially a balance. Oppositions, there are aspects where neither one really has the advantage over the other. That's why it can feel like a bit of a tug of war. So I think if the sun in Libra is illuminating any need to maintain balance and harmony, and efforts to keep things diplomatic or fair, equanimous, Mars at the same time, at the same degree, is really kicking up a fuss, so to speak, like bringing that very restless and raw energy that, we're experiencing pretty acutely. And I think it's taking a lot of energy to kind of now accept and figure out how to flow with. So this might be a turning point where the two are in this kind of conversational showdown. We might see things turn up in the news where there's some message from our people in positions of leadership or authority, perhaps delivering a message about the ways that we need to maintain some balance, and it's rousing or inflaming or highlighting the stress or the angst of the times. And then in your own birth chart, you might want to peek at like what house is Libra in your birth chart. Directly opposite that will be Aries. So the house topics that polarity is illuminating might be a place where you need to strike a bit of a balance. There might be a lot of output and maybe some frustration in the Aries area, and then it's having an effect on the Libra area, and then that area of your birth chart is figuring out how to hold that in balance, if that makes sense. So then, of course, a couple of hours later, that's when Mercury actually goes retrograde, and that's gonna be it's gonna be an interesting retrograde, because it's one of those retrogrades where Mercury straddles two signs. It's gonna last, the retrograde part at least, until the 3rd of November. But in the meantime, Mercury will backtrack out of Scorpio and go into Libra. So it's two sign areas that are going to be kind of re-explored or revisited or re-examined by Mercury's activity. So again, it's just putting a pin on anything that you've begun now and you thought you were starting to make progress on. Mercury's retrograde, it's usually a really good opportunity to now, again, manage your expectations, not expect everything to kind of come out in this clean, linear fashion when it comes to feeling productive. This is where time and communications and things start to kind of bend and warp a little bit, and we might feel that things are not moving forward, but that's okay. There's an opportunity there. If things are not moving forward, well, how can we best use the time? Probably not getting frustrated that things are not seeming to move forward, or that things are not getting across as clearly. It's a good way to think perhaps during these times, at least it's the line of least resistance and it's probably more sustainable. What can I go back into to re-examine and redefine and clarify and reconnect on, or re-communicate, so to speak. And it can be a good time because Mercury is associated with writing and teaching and studies and the delivery of information and the flow of currency and this sort of thing. It can be a good time if there's something that you've already started to sort of refine it, hone it, go back in, polish it up. If you're working on a writing project and you thought, oh, I'm gonna keep writing more chapters or something, it's like, this might be the time to go back and reread what you've written already and comb it for details, refine it, and be sure, is this really what you want to say, and is this what you really want to put out? Those are some ideas, some free associations and suggestions. And because the retrograde is happening in Scorpio, which is a very, it's Mars's sign, so it's a very penetrating and investigative and highly concentrated and focused and instinctive zodiac sign. So it really colors and hones the quality of communications to go a little bit deeper and have a laser focus. And it's interesting because Scorpio is ruled by Mars, belongs to Mars, and Mars is also retrograde. So it's almost like this doubling up of this activity where, you know, if we're fighting against the fact that Mars is typically initiatory or initiative style activities are not going forward, they're getting kind of frustrated. And now we're at a place of acceptance and working with what that can actually be good for. Then it's layering down and filtering down to the influence it's having on the quality of communications with Mercury in a Mars sign. So thoughts for that, and of course as Mercury backtracks, it's going to redo all of its previous aspects leading up to the U-turn. So that could be an interesting video to illustrate that in more detail. If you'd find that helpful, I think that might be actually fun to walk through that so you can kind of see what's coming. Then, you know, later in the evening, the moon moves along to make a really nice conjunction with Venus. So Mercury's just gone retrograde, but then we have the moon and Venus together in Virgo, and Virgo is Mercury's sign. So I think that can be really grounding and a time to get centered and to get our feet back on the ground and come back to sort of our heart or our intentions. And again, kind of putting a pin in that could be a really good way to travel through Mercury season, infused with that, you know, clarity with our feelings and our intentions with the moon, and staying really practical and, you know, rational or methodical in the way that we're connecting in our relationships. Then we get to the next day, Wednesday the 14th. The moon, now being in an earth sign, makes a lot of aspects to the outer planets, of course, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn by trine, and then forms an opposition with Neptune very early in the morning. That's really the first one to kind of kick off Wednesday, so it sets a bit of a dreamy tone. And then by the time the late evening rolls around, the moon leaves Virgo and enters Libra. So we're getting into the zone now where we're leading up to the new moon that's coming on Friday. So now that the moon is in Libra, it's getting closer and closer and closer to the sun, and eventually disappears into the location of the sun in the sky and will go dark. So that's coming up at the very end of the day, before midnight in the late evening. And then we get to Thursday, the 15th, the sun forms a square with Pluto. So with the sun being in Libra, we know that it's going to either have, you know, an opposition with Mars, like we explored on Tuesday, and then as it moves along later, of course, it's just a matter of time before it forms a square with Pluto, and then one with Saturn in Capricorn. So I feel like that Sun square Pluto very early Thursday morning feels like it's kind of related a little bit to whatever came up or got kicked up in the tension of Tuesday's Sun-Mars opposition. Pluto, I think, is holding down the signature of the really profound realities that we have to face and the way that they're transforming our world irreversibly. Whether we're on board with it or not, or we fully understand the full implications of it yet, Pluto is connected to these themes, especially on a material and structural level with our resources and society, and a somewhat internal and psychological level as well. So with the sun being in Libra, forming that square with Pluto, I think that, you know, the square aspect is a bit edgy, it's a bit catalytic, there's friction there, and it's kicking up some things that maybe were hidden or out of view or in the shadow that we have to take a closer look at with the illumination of the sun. But it might not be an easy reality, or it might not be a comfortable fit what comes to light around that time. So again, there might be something that pops up externally, like in the news, and certainly again explore your chart wherever Libra is and wherever the sun is in your chart, illuminating that area of life. It's a bit of an energy expenditure and a little bit of friction being caused by that square with Pluto, wherever Pluto is hanging out, slowly transforming a certain area indicated in your birth chart. Then we get to Friday, and now that the moon, of course, has crossed over into Libra, it gets later and later by degree through the sign of Libra, forms a square with Jupiter, forms an opposition with Mars, forms a square with Pluto. That's a pretty tough passage. So I broke that down into a lot of detail on this channel. There's a special video that I made about the 3 major lunations of October. So you can use the timestamp below the video to go straight to the Libra new moon forecast, and I pull up a chart and illustrate some of the hard aspects that happen and some of the implications and themes of this new moon. But in general, you can kind of see the new moon in Libra, which is the ending of a lunar cycle and an area of our lives that is on the verge of regrowing and renewing. Everything is kind of fallow and pared down for the moment. That moon is really in between. It's like a rock in a hard place. It's got a hard opposition with Mars and Pluto especially, and then right after it hops into a square with Saturn. And as I said in that longer video, I get into that a little bit in more depth and in more detail. So I would say, especially as I said, for late cardinal risings or late cardinal suns and moons, yeah, our energy has been really low, and we have been really tested in a lot of pivotal areas in our life in the last couple of years. So my caution for those folks, myself included, and really for anyone that matter that day, if you are feeling tired and a bit depleted and a bit at a loss, because the moon is new, that means it has no light. It doesn't have a lot of juice or a lot of energy to lend, to tap into, to feel sort of nurtured or protected by the moon, so to speak. Just try not to push it. Try not to overdo it and think that somehow you're going to I'm just gonna push through and I'm gonna be okay. It just feels like a day where there's a lot of tough stuff in our lap. We're really feeling you know, the cumulative effect of all that, and we don't have a lot of lunar juice to tap into to feel charged up and restored. So new moon times, the best of times, are really good times to just take rest, you know, maybe go into meditation. They can be really nice times to focus on letting go or grief or loss or contacting our ancestors, things like this, to kind of feel that on a deeper level, soul level, we're coming into some acceptance and peace, but also taking some rest and time to reflect. Don't push it too hard. It's just going to likely be a really intense day. You know, and if it isn't, it's not, it's not to say that I think that something specific will happen or something dramatic. I just think it's a feeling, and I just think it's been a tough go and a hard run, and that might feel like the day where we're like, woo, yeah. Checking those psychic boundaries, checking those emotional boundaries, and caring for our health and our energy. And then late at the night, the moon leaves Libra, leaves that zone of cardinal squares and oppositions and mashups, and enters Scorpio. So it'll probably be quite a reflective and insular weekend with that mysterious lunar placement. So there's no major planetary exact aspects that happen on Saturday, which I think is a bit of a blessing, because there's been a lot of potent ones throughout the week, and especially that huge event on Friday with the new moon and those intense aspects. So there's a moon opposite Uranus, and then there's a moon conjunct Mercury, which is kind of interesting. The Mercury is now gone retrograde. So tuning in on an emotional and intuitive level to Mercury and the themes that Mercury is carrying us through with its retrograde journey, and helping us to dig deeper into, to explore. I sort of feel like that conjunction kind of gives me the impression about going on, you know, raw instinct, or going on deep intuition, like going beyond, you know, tangibility and practicality, and tapping into something deeper and more instinctive that might open up some insight or reveal some interesting angles on an emotional and soul development level. So, and I think it's just really in line with how we may be feeling after that new moon on Friday anyway. So it really, the word that keeps coming to mind, it's almost like surrendering to the mystery, surrendering to, really surrendering to those low, dark, and mysterious energies of the new moon. And again, not fighting for anything productive and tangible, and just sort of see what comes up in the pause or in the still point after that dark moon and throughout the weekend. Then we get to Sunday. Oh my goodness, it has so many aspects. The reason why it has so many aspects is that a lot of our major planetary players at the moment are either in earth signs or water signs. So if the moon is in a water sign, it's going to make significant aspects with like most of those planets, and likely in a short amount of time if they're all of a kind of mid to later degree. So, you know, the moon in Scorpio passed through Saturday, making a couple of interesting aspects. And then Sunday has this moon sextile Venus, moon trine Neptune, moon sextile Jupiter. They're all really like positive and dreamy and interesting, but it's a lot of lunar action, like bringing these greater planets and their energy down into a little bit more of an intimate awareness. And then, of course, as the day sort of opens, we have two big aspects on Sunday, which is kind of interesting. Just before sunrise, the sun is square Saturn, which will have a similar signature and flavor that the sun and Pluto aspect of the other day had. Saturn, of course, is the planet of, boundaries and limitations and rebuilding. And also Saturn puts stress on things. It's like a stress testing teacher. It loads on a lot of like weight and responsibility. I believe that Saturn ultimately, because here's my digression about Saturn. Moon hour. Saturn is like the furthest planet, at least visible to the naked eye, on the outside of the solar system. And it's kind of this like, philosophically, you can look at Saturn as being this intermediary between more earthly and kind of human things, and then divine things, which are connected to the stars, concepts of the gods or the eternal. So Saturn being so far away, interestingly enough, is closer to, old world concepts of the divine. So we think about Saturn as being this kind of heavy, frustrating, grumpy teacher that brings a lot of difficulty and hardship. But there is often something kind of, divine in the workings of the stress that Saturn puts us through. For one thing, Saturn really often pushes us to confront sober realities, and being a timekeeper or a lord of time, Saturn reminds us that, we are mortal. This life in this current form will come to some kind of an end, as everything does. So we need to face up to that at some point, come into some peace with it, and work with that to some extent. So Saturn's a great teacher about things that we can't really control and we can't really change. But if we can adopt some kind of philosophy or some kind of belief or some form of a spiritual worldview, or maybe kind of some unifying meta-narrative that gives this life that we're living some kind of meaning, it can help us navigate through some of the hard things that Saturn brings to us. So I feel like with the sun making that square with Saturn, the sun is energy and illumination and conscious awareness, our self-expression, our self-authority, and also our leaders and authorities in our society on a mundane level. Coming into that square with Saturn, the sun, is about where we're putting our focus and where we're spending our energy. And Saturn is that boundary of teaching us that we have limitations, or putting limitations on that somehow, and course correcting and recalibrating, and teaching us some of our harder lessons about the things that we have to accept or face or work with. So that's kind of the vibe that the sun's day gets started on. And again, looking into your chart to see what two houses are in square aspect, Libra and Capricorn. What areas of life do they represent, and where are you having to learn to recalibrate your energies and your perceptions when dealing with some of the limitations and the lessons that we're learning about persevering through that. And then after sunrise, not long after, Venus, who's in Virgo, forms an opposition with Neptune in Pisces, and that should be an interesting one. Like Neptune, of course, as I mentioned, where are we escaping to? What is our sort of dream life or a fantasy life, or where do we go to tap into something transcendent? There's a lot of talk about restructuring, limitations, rebuilding, recalibrating your energy. Like there's just so much that we feel like literally and actually boxed in by this year. And there's Neptune floating above it all, inviting us to envision and dream and escape perhaps, or connect to something that transcends this all on some level. So with that opposition with Venus coming exact on Sunday, I think it's kind of highlighting maybe any themes of illusion or escape, or where we have to kind of check back in with reality when it comes to our relationships. Maybe it's a very good signature for creativity, perhaps having a transcendent idea or vision about a creative project, because Venus is also associated with the arts and artistic expression. It could be a time when maybe we have to check with, again, imagining our expectations. Are we getting a bit realistic? Are we getting a bit off the map or off the script? Is that helpful? Is it helping to us envision and have a broader perspective? Or is it getting us carried away from the realities that we have to tend to with our relationships now? So those, again, are some ideas that you can try on for size, some free associations, and see if those things come up. And again, it may not be an actual event. It may just be a feeling, but there may be some interesting things that pop up that have that signature that day. Maybe in the news, or just events in our life that are kind of interesting, like, oh, that happened, or that conversation happened, and that really felt like, you know, loving, nurturing, cohesive Venus in polarity, in conversation with transcendent Neptune. That's an interesting dynamic we could maybe look out for that day. Then the moon continues making the sextiles with the outer planets in Capricorn. Then by the evening, the moon enters fiery Sagittarius, and things might feel a little bit more lively and upbeat to start off the week. And then by late night, Mars forms a square with Jupiter, and this is a redo of a Jupiter square that Mars made in August. And so Jupiter, of course, is expansion and growth, and Mars is initiative and drive and confrontation. And it's a bit bottled up and frustrated and extra volatile right now because Mars is retrograde, bumping up against Jupiter. Jupiter is, like, we know now astronomically and scientifically that it's a gas planet. It's like likes to expand. It's really big. And then think about what happens when you light gas. You might have a bit of a blow up of some kind that could be the feeling or the mood or the angsty energy of Mars kind of blowing up in the bigness of Jupiter. And it could be a moment of, you know, tensions or tempers flaring, maybe blowing up and getting a little bit out of control or a bit hard to rein back in and contain. It could even just be a very enthusiastic time, like I've been, you know, frustrated and constrained for so long, and now there's this huge outburst or output of energy that's released. And because it's a square aspect, it's edgy and a little bit confrontational. So again, it just might be that ongoing conversation that Jupiter's about growth, but this year it's really slow growth. Mars is about wanting to do things fast and directly, especially so in fiery Aries, and temperamentally so while retrograde. It could just be having to come into contact or some acceptance about things are starting to grow and move forward because Jupiter's direct again, but it's maybe not feeling like it's fast enough. So it just feels to me like almost like pushing on pushing on the gas, but the car is not in gear. We're not going anywhere, but there's a whole lot of engine sound and fuel being burned. You can try that one on for size, another free association. So anyway, that's the rundown of the week with some charts just to illustrate what those aspects look like in the sky on the day. So like I say at the end of every video, if you'd like to have some personal one-to-one contact, use the contact links posted here at the end or in the About section of this channel. And yeah, be in touch as always if there's anything you would like to hear more about, maybe like a topic for a video. Sometimes it can be kind of fun to hear what people need or what they want, and you know, creativity loves a little bit of limitation, so it can help me kind of channel some of this information that's up in the cloud down into something that's useful for you. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and I will pop back on with some new video content when I get some time, but for sure I'll be back for the next weekly forecast. Take care.